Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Chapter 9, Text 26. Patrang pushpang palang tauyam yo me bhaktya prayachati tadaham bhakti upahritam No, it's bhakti upahritam. It's one word, not two words. Please hear and then repeat. Tadaham bhakti upahritam. Tadaham bhakti upahritam. Ashnami tat prayatat manaha. Yeah. Krsna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, says, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit or water, I will accept it. Purport. For the intelligent person, it is essential to be in Krishna consciousness, engaged in transcendental, loving service of the Lord in order to achieve a permanent, blissful abode for eternal happiness. The process of achieving such a marvelous result is very easy and can be attempted even by the poorest of the poor without any kind of qualification. The only qualification required in this connection is to be a pure devotee of the Lord. It does not matter what one is or where one is situated. The process is so easy that even a leaf or a little water or fruit can be offered to the Supreme Lord in genuine love, and the Lord will be pleased to accept it. No one therefore can be barred from Krishna consciousness because it is so easy and universal. Who is such a fool that he does not want to be Krishna conscious by this simple method and thus attain the highest perfectional life of eternity, bliss and knowledge? Krishna wants only loving service and nothing more. Krishna accepts even a little flower from his pure devotee. He does not want any kind of offering from a non-devotee. He is not in need of anything from anyone because he is self-sufficient. And yet he accepts the offering of his devotee in an exchange of love and affection. To develop Krishna consciousness is the highest perfection of life. Bhakti is mentioned twice in this verse in order to declare more emphatically that bhakti, or devotional service, is the only means to approach Krishna. No other condition, such as becoming a brahmana, a learned scholar, a very rich man, or a great philosopher, can induce Krishna to accept some offering. Without the basic principle of bhakti, nothing can induce the Lord to agree to accept anything from anyone. Bhakti is never causal. The process is eternal. It is direct action in service to the Absolute Whole. Here, Lord Krishna, having established that he is the only enjoyer, the primeval Lord, and the real object of all sacrificial offerings, reveals what types of sacrifices he desires to be offered. If one wishes to engage in devotional service to the Supreme in order to be purified and to reach the goal of life, the transcendental loving service of God, then one should find out what the Lord desires of him. One who loves Krishna will give him whatever he wants, and he avoids offering anything which is undesirable or unasked. Thus, meat, fish, and eggs should not be offered to Krishna. If he desired such things as offerings, he would have said so. Instead, he clearly requests that a leaf, fruit, flowers, and water be given to him, and he says of this offering, I will accept it. Therefore, we should understand that he will not accept meat, fish, and eggs. Vegetables, grains, fruits, milk and water are the proper foods for human beings and are prescribed by Lord Krishna himself. Whatever else we eat cannot be offered to him since he will not accept it. Thus we cannot be acting on the level of loving devotion if we offer such foods. In the 3rd chapter, verse 13, Sri Krishna explains that not only the remains of sacrifice are purified and fit for consumption by those who are seeking advancement in life and release from the clutches of the material entanglement. Those who do not make an offering of their food, he says in the same verse, are eating only sin. In other words, every mouthful is simply deepening their involvement in the complexities of material nature. By preparing nice, simple vegetable dishes, offering them before the picture or deity of Lord Krishna, and bowing down and praying for him to accept such a humble offering, enables one to advance steadily in life, to purify the body and to create fine brain tissues which will lead to clear thinking. Above all, the offering should be made with an attitude of love. Krishna has no need of food since he already possesses everything that be, yet he will accept the offering of one who desires to please him in that way. The important element in preparation, in serving and in offering is to act with love for Krishna. The impersonalistic philosophers who wish to maintain that the absolute truth is without senses cannot comprehend this verse of Bhagavad Gita. To them it is either a metaphor or proof of the mundane character of Krishna, the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita. But in actuality, Krishna, the Supreme Godhead, has senses, and it is stated that his senses are interchangeable. In other words, one sense can perform the function of any other. This is what it means to say that Krishna is absolute. Lacking senses, he could hardly be considered full in all opulences. In the 7th chapter, Krishna has explained that he impregnates the living entities into material nature. This is done by his looking upon material nature. And so in this instance, Krishna's hearing the devotee's words of love in offering foodstuffs is wholly identical with his eating and actually tasting. This point should be emphasized because of his absolute position. His hearing is wholly identical with his eating and tasting. Only the devotee who accepts Krishna as he describes himself without interpretation can understand that the supreme absolute truth can eat food and enjoy it. Patram pushpam phalam taryam yo me bhaktya prayachati tadaham bhaktyupahritam ashnami prayatatmanaha. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, flower, fruit, or water, I will accept it. All those who would like to snap photos are welcome to do so after the speech. Please, not during the speech. Thank you. This is a very sweet statement by Krishna. There is a saying in Sanskrit dramaturgy, that madhurena samapayat, or in poetry, that everything should finish sweetly. One should summarize things sweetly. I've been speaking quite philosophically and quite strongly. To speak philosophically means to speak strongly, because philosophy means to distinguish truth from illusion, and from the platform of persons in illusion, the truth seems to be very strong. And actually the truth is very strong. Krishna is the strongest. So I've been speaking quite strongly here. This evening, which is scheduled to be the last of my speeches in this visit to Dallas, I've selected this verse to speak on, even though it's a very sweet verse, that Krishna asks his devotee to, well, here he makes a statement that if one offers him with love, fruit, leaf, flower or water, he will accept it. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport states that Krishna is actually asking, so it's an indirect asking. If you go to someone's house and you may say to them that, well, I like to eat this and that, and it's a hint. Actually, why don't you feed me something? It could be like that. Although in most of India, there's no question when someone goes to someone else's house, but they must be fed. They're not allowed to leave without eating. It's, at least in Hindu culture, for want of a better term, it is considered a disaster if someone visits one's home without eating something. I used to see in Bengal that people, even if you just came for 2-3 minutes, at the least, they would give some water and some sugar, even if they couldn't afford anything else, because something should be given. So this is so Srila Prabhupada in his purport here, even though it's a very sweet consideration that Krishna is asking for food, but Srila Prabhupada shows the flip side of this also, that Krishna is asking for food from his devotees. It's a very simple process of God realization, and Srila Prabhupada rhetorically asks, who is the fool who will not take to such a process? So, sweetness and heaviness in Krishna consciousness go together. Krishna is very sweet and he's very strong. And we see that, for instance, when Krishna in Vrindavan, he would prepare himself to fight the demons like Arishta, who had entered Vrindavan. But Krishna first of all adjusted his belt, his sash very nicely, because he knew the gopis were watching and he wants to appear just nice for them as he's preparing to kill the bull. So it's Gopi Leela and killing Leela, all mixed up. Srila Prabhupada noted in one lecture that although the Gopi Leela is best known from the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, if we analyze and enumerate, we'll find that there's more killing Leela than Gopi Leela in the 10th canto. So we shouldn't neglect the Gopi Leela. But Krishna consciousness is all round, and as stated by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and Chaitanya Charitamrita, that Madhurja Bhagavatasa, the essence of God's being God, the essence of Bhagavan being Bhagavan, his Bhagavata, is sweetness. So definitely Krishna is very sweet. But we can't understand the sweetness of Krishna if we are still trying to relish the false sweetness of this world. Therefore, that heaviness is also required to help us to understand that what in this world we consider to be sweet is actually just like poison. And vice versa, that what we consider to be poison, such as following regulated principles, yad tadagre vishamin eva pariname mritopamam, that which we consider to be horrible, renunciation, philosophy, by applying ourselves to that, we find it's actually just like nectar. It seems like poison to us because our consciousness is poisoned by material desire. But here in this verse, Krishna, he brings us to the essence of all the topics of Bhagavad Gita. You can try and listen. You're singing very nicely. Try and hear very nicely also. Krishna brings us to the essence of all these topics. Krishna is here in discussing, in Bhagavad Gita, he discusses actually he touches on topics which if we investigate them deeply, we'll find they're very deep. And there may be difficult for us to comprehend, just like chapter 13 is titled in English, Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. So to understand all these points in depth and to extricate the misunderstandings from that of the mundane philosophers, well, it could be a study that goes on over many lifetimes. After many lifetimes, Krishna says, Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate. After many lifetimes of studying philosophy, Krishna says that someone who's actually knowledgeable, one who comes to the actual point of knowledge, he surrenders to me. The five central topics of Bhagavad Gita are Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala and Karma, the supreme controller, the controlled living beings, nature or energy, time and activity. But even one of these subjects, if we are to study in detail, but actually you can't really understand them without, they're all interrelated. You can't really understand one of them individually. But even any subject which you try to study, you'll find that the study of it is unlimited, especially when we take into account all the speculations and lucubrations of various mundane philosophers. I'm just, in my various studies, just beginning to touch on the topic of time, understanding what is time. One of the basic subjects of Bhagavad Gita, which Krishna says, Kalosmi, I am time. It's much more complex than we can imagine. If we all think, well, we know what time is, but we all know what it is in a somewhat superficial way. If we try to understand what time is, time can only be understood in relation to space and objects, and in philosophy, and whether either Vedic or Indian philosophy or Western philosophy as it's developed over the years, it's a very complex topic to actually understand what it is. So Krishna gives us here in Bhagavad Gita a summary of all knowledge, all philosophy, and the essence of it he presents in verses such as this. It's not only in this verse, there are other verses in which he speaks of, for instance, Ananya Cheta Satatam Yo Mam Smarti Nityashaha Tasyaham Sulabha Partha Nitya Yuktasya Yoginaha. This is another verse in which Krishna extols pure devotion to himself, in which he says that one who thinks of me always, without deviation, Ananya Cheta Satatam, and he emphasizes, just like in this verse, he uses the word bhakti twice to emphasize. So in this verse, he says satata and nityashaha, which are more or less synonyms. One who thinks of me only, always. Krishna says, for him, for such a person, I am very easy to attain. Because he's such a yogi, is always linked with me. That the goal of yoga is to link with the Supreme. Krishna is the Supreme. So one who is linked with Krishna by always thinking of him, he is the perfect yogi. So there are several verses here in Bhagavad Gita in which Krishna gives the essence. And this one, if we think about it, the essence of pure devotion, it, for those who are somewhat stymied by complex discussions of philosophy, or who are used to ritualistic or fanatic types of religiosity, this will come as great relief and very refreshing, just to know that Krishna wants us to feed him. This concept is unimaginable in Abrahamic religions. For instance, in Christianity, if we ask the minister or the priest that, well, can I feed Jesus? It wouldn't be, the very question would not be understood, because the concept of feeding Jesus is just not there. What does Jesus like to eat? I want to feed him something. In India we see that Christians, they'll keep a statue of Jesus, dress him, offer arati, feed him. They didn't get this from Rome. They got this from the Hindu culture, Vedic culture, that we have a deity and we have to feed the deity. There are some deities who they accept meat and wine. The meat eaters and the wine drinkers can offer, they can sacrifice animals. But Krishna, he doesn't, in the middle of the battlefield, the battle is yet to begin, in which slaughter is about to take place. Krishna says, I like to eat fruit, leaf, flower, and water. Although he says, Grasishnu, I eat everything. I devour everything. In one sense, he eats everything. Everyone is eaten by Krishna ultimately, in the sense that as the universal form, everything enters into him, as Arjuna will see. But in his Somya Rupa, as Arjuna says to Krishna, Somya Vapu, his very beautiful and charming form, Arjuna asks Krishna, after Krishna has shown to Arjuna his Vishvarupa, the frightening form of the material universe, Arjuna, he wants to again see the very beautiful and charming form of Krishna, who likes to eat fruit, flower, leaf, and water. It's one kind of devotion or beginning of devotion to pray to him for our daily bread. But a better level of devotion is to feed him with his daily bread. Krishna is hungry. We should feed him. And we find it's a very elaborate part of Krishna Bhakti, as we see especially in temple. Needs feeding? Baby needs feeding? Or just restless? We find that regular offering, cooking food, so many different items, that according to season, he'll be in the present season in India, which is very hot, just like in the Vallabh Sampradaya, Nathdwara and other places, they'll offer foods that cool the body, such as chutney made from, or sherbet made from raw mangoes, or unripe mangoes. And in the cold season, here in the summer they'll dress him in almost no clothes. And in the winter he'll be wrapped up so much you can just see his eyes. And they'll offer very heating foods and heating oils. Whereas in the summer they'll offer cooling oils, because the whole point is Krishna is supreme, but he's a person, and he's a loving person who wants us to, he craves our love. That is the essence of bhakti. And there are many instances of this, This very verse, Patrang Pushpang Phalam Toyam, this famous verse from spoken in Bhagavad Gita, it also appears as one of the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anyone know in which section of the Bhagavatam that appears? The very same verse. Anyone? It appears in the section where Sudama, his childhood friend, his schoolmate, comes to visit Krishna, and he brings some low-grade rice, this chipped rice, and he's afraid to give it to Krishna because it's not the kind of thing that rich people eat. Krishna's a rich prince, and this kind of chipped rice is eaten by poor people in the villages. Actually, some of the nicest food is eaten by poor food in the villages, and rich people in the cities, I'm talking about India here, they think it's below their dignity to eat things like, you just walk outside and go in the field and pick up some weeds and cook them, and that's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very much like these kind of food. So anyway, when Krishna, being omniscient, knows that Sudama has brought him this food, and over Sudama's protests that this food is not fit for the husband of the goddess of fortune, Krishna recites this verse, Patram Pushpang Palam Toyam. So there we see there's an instance of, we see in this incident of Sudama coming that he's not highly rated materially, but he's highly rated by Krishna. So that's the whole point, to become dear to Krishna. In the Bhagavatam we find in Krishna Lila, Krishna is herding the cows with his cowherd boys. They wander long distance to what is the edge of, one of the edges of Rajamandala, to an area where Vedic Brahmanas are performing ritualistic sacrifices, which involves offering grains and ghee in the fire. And the Yagyabhuk, Yagyapati, Yagyeshva, the enjoyer of and master of the yagya, of the sacrifice, is Vishnu. So they're there formally offering food in the fire, but then when Krishna and Balaram sent their representatives, the cowherd boys, to say, hey, could you feed us? We're hungry. They said, no way, come on, get out of here. But then when the cowherd boys came back and got the valuable instruction from Krishna, valuable for persons who would beg, that beggars can't expect to be successful everywhere, the cowherd boys were directed to approach the wives of the Yajnik Brahmanas, who immediately complied with Krishna's request. And they were delighted to know that Krishna, who they were always meditating upon, they were delighted to know that Krishna has come personally, and all the fancy foods which they're supposed to, that's also supposed to be offered in Yagya and distributed, and Brahmana Bhojana Priya, Brahmanas are known to be fond of good food. They were quite happy to distribute that to Krishna and the cowherd boys. So here we have the Brahmanas who are performing all the rituals of sacrifice, which is meant to please Vishnu, but they have no real intention to please Vishnu. Whereas their wives, when they hear Krishna is hungry, he wants to eat, they immediately, overstepping the orders of their husbands, rushed out to Krishna and brought him and all the cowherd boys nice food to eat. I've heard it said that Srila Prabhupada had said that my only desire is to go to Golok Vrindavan and steal Krishna's lunchbox. Generally Krishna, he's given by, and all the cowherd boys, they're given what in modern Indian languages, taken from English, is called a tiffin to take out for lunch. But being hungry boys, young boys are generally always hungry. Maybe not in the present day when they're sitting down in school all day, in some air-conditioned atmosphere, but definitely if they're out taking out the cows, they're going to get hungry. Wandering around, playing around, even though they eat a pretty hefty breakfast. This description is given of some of the items of Krishna's breakfast is given in the song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this Shukta Shakadi Bhaji Nalita Kushmanda Dali Dalna Dugda Tumbi Dodhi Mochakanda. That's just one line of several lines of the different items which Krishna eats for breakfast. That's not a midday song, it's a breakfast song, because at midday Krishna's out in the forest with the cows. So Krishna tends to be hungry. How is that? How is God hungry? He's self-satisfied. He feeds everyone. Then how is he hungry? He in his pastimes, he becomes hungry to facilitate the love of his devotees who feel as if Krishna is dependent upon me. Krishna is not dependent upon anyone, but he himself feels like that, to reciprocate love with his devotees. And in this pastime of the Yagya Patnis, the wife of the ritualistic sacrificial brahmanas, it was demonstrated that even though, as the brahmanas themselves later pointed out, although they're just women, they never had a proper education, and we're high-class brahmanas and we know how to chant Sanskrit mantras, but they got the point and we didn't. We got stuck up just with rituals, but still they didn't go to Krishna because they were afraid of Kamsa. They were living on the edge of Vrindavan, the Vrajamandala, which is close to Mathura city. But even then, if there'd been actual devotees, they would have been confident that Krishna will protect us. They didn't. They understood after their mistake of refusing Krishna food, they understood that it was a mistake, but still they weren't prepared to rectify it. So Krishna is very kind to devotees. They may be apparently lesser in human society, just like women. Now, in the modern age, that's not there, but in most traditional cultures throughout the world, women have always had a subordinate social role, and there's a reason for that. There are many reasons for that within Vedic culture. It is also part of Vedic culture. But if one is very poor, like Sudama, or considered of lesser status, like a woman, if they have devotion to Krishna, they're very dear to Krishna, which is the perfection of life. And if someone may be very highly placed in human society, but if they don't have devotion for Krishna, then it's all useless. As is stated in the Hari Bhakti Sudhodaya, that Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jati Shastra Japastapaha Apranasyaiva Dehasya Mandanam Loka Ranjanam. It stated that even if one has high birth, even if one is highly learned, in scripture, even if one performs lots of japa, even if one is very austere, if he lacks Bhagavad Bhakti, devotion to Krishna, then all these apparent good qualifications, they are comparable to the decorations on a dead body. If we see it, we may see someone is sitting in a corner and they look very grand with lots of very nicely dressed with a suit and tie and some very nicely trimmed, freshly shaved with well, in the Western world, men don't wear ornaments, and increasingly in India not, and women don't also in the Western world, and increasingly in India also, because I don't know why, but they don't like to. They're all going to be the same. Men and women dress in shorts and t-shirts, and they both look miserable. But in Vedic culture, a man also can be dressed in, or should be dressed in various ornaments. So if you see someone highly ornamented with a turban and gold and so many nice things, and you go up to him, oh, it looks very nice, and you get close and see a dead body. Oh. All of a sudden, those ornaments, which are ornaments to make the body look better, when a dead body, there's nothing you can do to make it look better. It's not attractive. However attractive it may have been prior to the departure of the soul from the body, once the soul is departed from the body, it is no longer attractive. So this point that Krishna is making here, that he likes to be fed. He's the supreme controller. He is established in Bhagavad Gita. He's the supreme controller. He's the supreme master. He's the supreme protector of his devotees. But he also asks something from his devotees. Although he's completely self-sufficient, as is established here in Bhagavad Gita, but he also establishes that he wants from his devotees not merely prayers, but something practical. Krishna is hungry. He should be fed. The wives of the Yajnik Brahmanas, they heard, oh, Krishna is hungry. And they immediately became in anxiety. How to feed Krishna? We see, and there are many paintings of Krishna sucking the breast of his mother. It's a common theme in Indian art, or Rama as a child sucking the breast of Kaushalya. And Krishna, when Brahma stole all the calves and the cowherd boys, Krishna expanded himself into those forms so that he became the sons of all the women of Vrindavan who were of similar age to Yashoda, and in this way fulfilled their desire. For a whole year, he fulfilled their desire, their motherly, spiritually motherly desire to feed Krishna from their breast milk. And the cows also, all of the cows, they wanted to feed Krishna with their milk, so Krishna took the form of calves and for 1 year drank the milk from those cows. So this is Krishna's very great kindness, that he's the supreme, that is very clearly established in Bhagavad Gita. He's great, he's powerful, he's mighty. You better not get on the wrong side of him. It's not a good idea. But at the same time, for his devotees, he extends himself to them without any consideration of whether they're rich or poor. In fact, dinere adhik daya kare Bhagavan. Kulin pandit dhani bharo abhiman. Those who, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu states that those who are considered very poor and lowly in human society, they tend to get Krishna's mercy more because they tend to be more humble. And persons who are very proud, I'm very high birth, I'm very learned, I'm very intelligent, I'm very rich, that very pride cuts them off from Krishna's mercy, because Krishna gives himself to devotees who are very humble, not persons who are very proud. Of course, another famous example of Krishna reciprocating with a humble devotee and not with someone who's materially very great is the incident of Krishna refusing to eat food from Duryodhana, because as Krishna told him directly, that you are the enemy of the Pandavas. You have acted against them in so many ways. The Pandavas are my great devotees. Anyone who is an enemy of the Pandavas is an enemy of me. I will not eat. I will not accept your invitation. Because he knew that Duryodhana was not inviting Krishna in a spirit of devotion, but in a political, diplomatic way to further his own ends. He didn't have the spirit. He didn't have the spirit of Atiti Narayana. In this case, his guest would have been directly Narayana, but he had no regard for Narayana or for anyone else except those who helped him or in his nefarious schemes. So he liked Karna because Karna was loyal to him, but it was a wicked alliance. Some people say Karna is very noble and very good. Well, very loyal to Duryodhana, but good qualities applied to bad people, loyalty to a bad person is not a good quality. Nobility, noble behavior, when one's basic outlook is demoniac, that's not a very good quality. So Krishna, he likes his devotees, and he not only accepts food from them, but he asks for that. Krishna wouldn't eat from Duryodhana, but he personally went to visit Vidur, whose wife was there, and she was so happy to feed Krishna. It's a well-known story. She only had bananas in the house, so she was peeling the bananas and feeding Krishna. But in her extreme joy at receiving Krishna, she got a little mixed up, and she was giving this banana skin to Krishna, and not the banana itself, and not the banana fruit. And Krishna, accepting her ecstasy, her ecstatic offering, he had the banana skins. That's Krishna. So, devotional service to Krishna is very easy to execute. We can offer, if we offer Krishna with love, fruit, leaf, flower, or water, he will accept it. But then the difficult part is, where's the love? Because as long as we have material desires, we can't have ananya bhakti, pure, concentrated love for Krishna. Then again, we have to come to philosophy, so we can differentiate between what should be done and what should not be done, so that we can gradually purify our desires and become fit to actually offer something to Krishna. In the neophyte stage, we may be allowed to offer something to Krishna by the agency of the parampara, the gurus in parampara. They can authorize a person to conduct deity worship if they see that the person is actually willing to perform deity worship. Deity worship means serving God. There's some qualification is required for that. The qualification is suggested here in the word prayatatmanaha in this verse, which Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains to mean that someone who is properly following all the many rules and regulations which are given in Shastra for performing the process of archan, deity worship. So Krishna accepts food, but in the neophyte stage, we have to offer it through the prescribed processes. Not that we'll feed Krishna with some banana skins. But we don't have that ecstasy. We may think we have that ecstasy, but that in many cases will be some kind of self-cheating, to feel lots of bhav when we're doing bhakti and then feel lots of bhav when we're engaged in sense gratification also. That means that the bhav in bhakti, it's not proper, it's not full and mature and complete. It can be a kind of self-deception. So we have to hear philosophy, we have to act according to the rules and regulations of Shastra to come to this stage of understanding what it means to serve Krishna. Krishna cannot be served neglectfully. The Krishna accepted the offering of Vidurani, the wife of Vidur. Why did he accept this banana skins? Because she offered it with unstinting, full love for him. That platform is not to be imitated, it is to be aspired for. And Krishna is so kind that even in our neophyte stage, he allows us to offer him various foods. But then we have to, for that food to be accepted by Krishna, we have to at least begin to exhibit the behavior of pure devotees. For instance, sometimes we see people, they offer the deity for breakfast, a little milk and a little mishri, this sugar candy. And for themselves, they're eating kachoris and so many other things. Or they offer Krishna some things, and then they also get from the store some bread and some cookies and all this kind of thing. But pure devotion means, as Krishna will say in the next verse, Yad karoshi, yad ashnasi. Ashnasi, the same word, means to eat. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, tat kurushvam adarpanam. It has to be done in offering to Krishna. So pure devotees, they only eat that which is offered to Krishna. No sense gratification. The willingness to give up sense gratification is a symptom of someone who is very serious to attain to the stage of pure devotion to Krishna. We might think that pure devotion means someone who sings in a very pleasing voice and on their face it looks like their heart's about to crack when they're singing. Well, if they actually feel like that, that's very nice, although we don't see that Srila Prabhupada generally articulated his inner emotions. He didn't demonstrate them. That's something to be kept secret. But one's actual devotion will be manifest in one's steady commitment to serve Krishna according to the process given by the acharyas, to cultivate the spirit of ahaituki bhakti without any personal desire, with such an attitude that we're not going to give up, we want to perform devotional service 24 hours a day without any other interest. So all these points are described elsewhere in Shastra, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The nectar of devotion is very important, and there are others also. But here the essence of what Krishna wants from us is expressed. He wants our pure devotion, not just in feeling, but there is a process also. He wants us to offer fruit, flower, leaf, water. He wants us to, in the nectar of devotion, many processes. He wants us to sing for Him. He wants us to dance for Him. He wants to offer our everything for Him. Hare Krishna. Any question about this, please?
There's evidence in the Bible in the letters section that their Sunday program originally started off with cooking and offering food to the Lord and then sharing out prasadam.
Oh, Oh yeah, that's that in the Mass, the Catholic Mass, they still have that. The giving the Eucharist, which is supposed to represent, and wine used to be given. It's supposed to represent the body and blood of Jesus, which is a bit of a ghastly idea.
It seems to become that. It started off something different.
Yeah. They had. It's not exactly the same as distributing prasadam.
Well, in the original, it seems to have been.
Yeah. In the original, it might have been something like that. Yeah, something like prasadam, that idea. Yeah, anything else?
Yes, about cultivating pure devotional service in an atmosphere that is anti-devotional. For example, most of us work, and if any of us work, especially in corporate America or corporate Europe, it's not just enough if you go to a job and you do your job and you mind your own business and you come back. You're expected to go to parties, you're expected to go to lunch with your team members or to some restaurant, and you're expected, and if you try to avoid that, then they look unfavorably upon you. So, how do we live?
Frequently asked question, how to live in corporate America and still be a devotee? When frequently asked question. Well, I'll just answer it briefly. And if you want a fuller answer, ask Vrindavan Chandra to select a lecture or lectures from me on this topic. In fact, I haven't gone through it myself, but there are more than 2,000 lectures on my website, and you can put a search and then find out different subjects. But in brief, Srila Prabhupada's all-around social solution was Varnashram. Get out of corporate America, go to the land, live with devotees, chant Hare Krishna, and in this way devotees can conjointly create a situation in which they can live with their families and be Krishna conscious. That's the answer in brief. If you can't do that, then you have to make the best use of a bad bargain, which you better ask someone who's doing it. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to be Krishna conscious when you're around people who are talking all nonsense all day and whose goal of life is to be as nonsensical as possible, although they wouldn't put it in those words themselves. It's not favorable atmosphere for being Krishna conscious. It is possible, but it surprises me how devotees in India, especially more than in America, where people in America generally only work 40 hours a week, whereas in India it's 60, 70, 80 is more common, but there are still devotees who chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regulated principles, although usually that's about all, because there's no time for sadhana if you're working 70 hours a week. And the rounds are often, sometimes daily, offered on the packed train going to work. So it's not a very good alternative, and congratulations to those who are managing to survive in Krishna consciousness, but it's not a very good situation. You can try. Anyway, you can get more detail there. The other thing is retire as soon as you can and get yourself in a better situation. Yeah, there's another question here I saw first.
Maharaj, you mentioned about Krsna. What about Bhishma?
What about Bhishma?
Yeah, he's also revered as one of the 12.
What do you mean, what about Bhishma? What's the specific question?
He was on the wrong side of Dharma with Duryodhana.
Bhishma, yeah, he was on the side of Duryodhana. Yeah, so? What's the question?
But same as Krsna, except we referred Bhishma Dev as one of the 12 Mahajans.
Oh, well, there's a difference between Bhishma's attitude and Karna's attitude. Karna was not only physically, but fully emotionally supportive of Duryodhana. But Bhishma, circumstantially, he felt himself obliged to fight on the side of Duryodhana, because he'd been maintained by Duryodhana for the 13 years that the Pandavas were in exile. But emotionally he didn't support. And he would often chastise Duryodhana in the battle, that call him all bad names, and Karna, especially Bhishma. Karna refused to fight as long as Bhishma was there, because he thought as long as Bhishma was fighting, Karna said, I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to fight with that. He's always discouraging us. So there's a great difference. But if we get into Mahabharata questions, then we get into a Mahabharata, and we'll be here for days and days and days. But that's also, if you'll see in the first chapter of the Gita, that in some of the first purports, Srila Prabhupada briefly addresses this question of how Bhishma, due to various circumstantial reasons, was fighting on the path of Duryodhana. That's why Duryodhana, that Srila Prabhupada points that out following the previous acharyas. Bhavan Bhishmascha Karnascha. He speaks, you Bhishma, he points out first of all Bhishma's name, to try to encourage Bhishma, because he knows that Bhishma is not in his heart fully committed to Duryodhana's cause. And by saying Bhavan, it could also mean you, could also mean Drona. So this way he makes them both believe that he's addressing them first. Yeah, what was your question?
I had two questions on prasadam, and meaning I was wondering, because many times, take for example, I've seen one devotee who runs a Krishna Prasad program, but I won't name him, but he's preparing them, he's watching the TV and he's listening to Karma music.
Someone who's preparing prasadam and watching TV Karmi programs, and listening to Karmi music, then why should Krishna accept? Krishna says, one who offers me with bhakti. There are symptoms of bhakti. There are do's and do nots. So if someone is doing the do nots while he's you can stick it in front of a deity of Krishna and thinking that Krishna is an offering machine if I mumble some mantras, then Krishna is obliged to accept it. But Krishna is not obliged to accept it. And it's offensive to do like that. That is not bhakti. Therefore, prayatatmanaha, which Srila Prabhupada translates here, from one in pure consciousness. So one has to cultivate pure consciousness. Hare Krishna.